Godtear, a new champion has arrived. And part one of this first impression Tactica vlog, we're going to explore that champion, looking at the stats, looking at the abilities, and beginning to ask what opportunities on the tabletop, what missions, how are we going to play this champion? Part two is going to examine the followers, looking at how they would support the champion or what opportunities there will be in working as a warband, as a complete whole. And then part three, which will follow, is going to explore the tabletop itself. What synergies can we begin to see with working with other champions? How are the missions, the different missions, going to layer over? And what rank is this champion and followers going to offer in the Godtear universe? So we have Durthax, Branch Lord, and Treekin. Now, the first thing, of course, is the narrative. What an amazing champion. We're in this mystical forest, this ancient forest, the tears from the gods raining down, infusing that forest, creating this champion and followers. And every single time that a new champion is released, and it's so unique, it's so interesting with the abilities and the powers, and I'm like, they can't just make anything cooler than this. We get a new champion that pushes that forward. So I'm very excited to see above and beyond just kind of the standard fantasy champions that are out there. Visually, tactically, wow, just the sculpt is amazing. Pushing that aside, how does it work on the tabletop? Well, let's jump in with the stats, because with the champions and the followers, the stats are going to give you a baseline to determine two things. How this champion works on their own, if you're playing a one champion game, but also playing 2 or 3 champion games, or maybe even higher if you're playing some custom games, to look at synergy and look at, does this champion or can this champion operate on their own if needed, or is it going to need some support and other things to work? And those stats often push into the abilities. How often, how long, how much am I going to be able to use those abilities? So we use that as kind of the entry point, in my opinion, looking at that base Tactica and asking those questions. What are we going to do with this tree on the table? 0-1 move. Slow moving. Well, that kind of fits the narrative. There is some ability for some beyond movement that breaks the rules, and we're going to explore that as an ability. So it's not that the movement is non-existent or super slow. It's just my base move in that action is going to be 0-1, which means to move on the tabletop, I'm going to have to burn an ability. So we're keeping that piece in mind. But the uproot ability is a little bit interesting in the wording once you dig into it. So at first glance, I'm like, well, this is a really slow champion. There are other slow champions in the game, certainly, and it fits the narrative. It's this giant, massive, just God-tier fueled tree, but there's some workarounds. And the movement, once we layer over some of the other stats, I don't think is as much as a deficiency as it might appear at first glance going through those stats. 2 agility, 1 armor. Okay, the 1 armor looks interesting because as a champion, it's one thing to have 1 armor for a follower. They get hit, you can recruit, you can bring them back. Mid to end game, you might not want to burn those actions. They're there to open up other opportunities on the table. Where the action really happens is with the champions. So having 1 armor going up against a Slayer or something that can deal some alpha damage, the reduction, if they roll legendary to hit me, and they hit me with everything, especially if they've got some combos and things, I only have a reduction of 1. That's going to transfer a lot of damage to me. But when I look at this, 14 health. 14 health with a sidebar. Now, I know we're looking at stats right now with a sidebar on abilities for possibly regeneration. 14 health is huge. And right away, that tells me 2 things. 2 possible Tactica opportunities. This champion, area control. If I can get them and park them in a certain area, hopefully next to a giant pile of tears, that is going to be dominant. My opponent, their other champions, they're going to have to push me off. They're going to have to force me off. They're going to have to remove me. They're going to have to defeat that champion and get me to burn some actions to bring the champion back, take it out for a turn. But I've got 14 health. That means where I literally plant, I'm not moving. Second to that is a question of resources. And I want to sidebar for a moment because this champion really opens up, in my opinion, an interesting opportunity. There are numerous choices in Godtear. There's numerous activations. I move, you move, then you go, I go, you go. There's interrupts. There's a lot of dynamic choices to be made turn by turn. Fantastic. Amazing. But it's also a resource game. You're limited to a number of turns, and those turns are very dynamic, but you're limited to a number of turns. And essentially, there's only so much you can do on the cards. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean that you have to make choices. What do I want to do this turn? Where am I going to be next turn? So if you can get a champion to burn turns, what I mean by that is if you send, let's say we're playing a 2-champion game, and I move up with Durthax, I plant, I'm on that objective hex, I'm planting banners, I'm doing all that type of stuff. I'm not going anywhere. I've got my followers moving up. If you move up with 2 champions to attack my champion to try and take them out, so this way I have to burn that resource to bring them back, I'm literally soaking up. I'm literally soaking up turns of damage from you, especially if we're playing a Slayer combo, right? We earn these points in Godtear, and we've got the sliding scale. It's very dynamic. But the idea of Slayers in a lot of warbands, if they're 3, will include at least 1 Slayer or 2 for that alpha, meaning my champions move up to the tiers to claim them. That means if I'm playing Slayers, I see Durthax as like the anti-Slayer, especially if you're playing those very heavy warbands. And it's going to be interesting to balance out that aspect. But I move up to claim. You're moving up with a Slayer not only to claim, but also to knock me out, to get those initial points plus bonus points for being a Slayer. You knock me out, you get that points, those points, and you also remove me from a turn that I have to spend to bring back. Now we've got that framework. I've got 14 health plus regen. We're not even at the regen yet. We're just looking base stats if I just rolled with this. I've got 14 health. I'm going to take a lot of hits because you've got a hit. You've got a damage. If I have some synergies where I can boost some armor and make Durthax even more annoying, that's really interesting. So now I'm up there. I'm planting banners. I'm absorbing damage. I'm doing my thing with area control. If you're burning 2 or 3 turns or 4 turns, if it's 1 Slayer to kill me, you might get those points, but usually a Slayer should be able to take out a champion twice in a game with good combos and good synergies. That's going to cut down to 1, just looking at this. Now you could roll legendary, but I think that's about average. If you're rolling less than average and the Godtear dice gods are not with you, I might go the whole game and your Slayer doesn't take me out. That is burning your Slayer actions, but also denying you a significant portion of points on that sliding scale. 14 health. Very interesting. Fits that theme. I mean, I'm just a magic-infused tree. Now let's jump into the stats for a moment. We've got Uproot. Place Durthax up to 2 hexes. Place up to 2 hexes. Now, I interpret that as the ability to just quickly move. That is a guaranteed moving forward. Place. So if you're going to, I guess it's just this massive tree moving, if you're going to use effects to try and slow me down and take that, that means I'm going to be able to bypass that. I'm placing up to 2 hexes. I mean, I'm technically not moving, I'm placing. This means turn 1, often in Godtear, what we see is, I don't want to say nothing's happening if we're playing just, say, the classic mission, Life with the pile of tiers in the center. Turn 1 is about moving into position, getting your champions and warbands out there and getting ready for that clash on turn 2. So this slow movement with Uproot, I'm going to be able to get up there turn 1. I'm going to be able to get up there turn 2 and then plant. So suddenly the 0-1 move doesn't look as crazy as it is, especially since the synergy of this champion seems to be literally root yourself into the ground and start using your effects and beating on stuff and claiming banners and just being a giant magnet for taking damage, trying to get others to burn turns. So that uproot kind of nullifies the stats, and it's a place command. It's not a move up to, it's place. Now, Canopy, this is interesting. Small followers, they get 2 shield. They get an armor boost. That's going to be some interesting synergy in a moment. Area denial. And that's really interesting. An area denial champion possibly working with a Slayer in combo, where if I can dominate, and again, I'm looking at life as the first mission because it's just that starting point. If I can dominate that pile of tiers and work on banner domination, and then if have a second 2 warband Slayer that I'm sending out just to vacuum up as many points as I can, that's interesting. So we've got the small followers that are going to boost their armor. That makes them extremely more resilient. I'm going to sidebar for a moment because one of the things that I see mid-game is you're looking to start getting points. And depending on your warband faction, you might start targeting followers because they're generally easier to kill without buffs. And second, you can get bonus points for them, again, depending on the warband. So mid-game, where we have less stuff on the tabletop and we're looking at the mission objectives, sometimes, not always, you might say, well, the easiest way to prevent my followers from being killed is area denial. Run away. Take that champion that's trying to vacuum up and kill a bunch of followers and other followers killing your followers. Just take them away and run them in the opposite direction. Because if we're at mid-game to end-game, my champion can take some hits and solo that area. The game ends, we get the points. So it's not only Godtear about earning the points, there's the duality of at the same time denying those points from the other warbands, from your opponent. So now, if I can boost that armor with my treekin, the followers, that means I have a duality of a choice. I might still run away, depending on what's going on, if those champions have burned their power for the game. I'm thinking Blackjaw with that super fireball sweep that just annihilates everything in that radius. I still might run if I'm facing that, but now I have some options where I can plan. I can hold that for end game. That's interesting. If I'm a little bit behind of points mid to end game, well, now I have a second option, and it's building again that synergy with the area control, which we're going to see in a minute for the treekin. Okay, powers. Well, what we've got there is the hit effect. We've got growth spurt. Hit effect, move target 1 hex, remove 1 wound. And then you've got a base attack to try and damage followers or damage a champion. Move target 1 hex, remove 1 wound from Durthax. Regeneration, right there. Hit effect, I just have to hit. Hit effects are interesting because there's like this dice pool that we have to go through in Godtear. Sidebar again for a moment, but this idea of my first analysis of this champion is whatever my dice pool is of attacking. Obviously a Slayer is going to be higher, generally speaking, than other warbands. I might have ways to boost that attack in a moment, right? There's a lot of different warbands and champions that can do that. But I start out with this dice pool. Then I've got to hit you. So it's less. I roll a bunch of dice, not all of them hit. Then we've got to see what transfers to damage going against armor. So this idea of the dice pool gets smaller till there's an effect. If I roll legendary, that pool's going to be bigger. If it's not really legendary, then it might just fizzle out along the way. But hit effect means when you hit, this is what happens. So with that, move 1 hex, remove 1 wound. A little bit of an area denial. Get them off the pile of tiers. Push something somewhere. Manipulation, possibly for later banners and other synergies and other plants. That opens up a lot. So you got this giant tree camping on the tiers where all the action is and just radiating out limbs, pushing things away. And I'm healing 1 wound. So potentially 6 health, 5 health because turn 1 is moving on there. If I take into account average dice rolls, plus 4 health. That's the equivalent of plus 4 health on there. So I'm up to 18. That's pretty cool. That's interesting, right? We can see these gears turning where you're like, this is already kind of becoming an auto-include in my warband. Powers. Every champion may make a claim action. So I can pop that off in that phase. That's interesting because do I want to go for an early game plant and be aggressive and moving up? Do I want to do that mid game? Do I want to do that end game? What we start to see, if it says every champion, now we have a magnification type effect where if I'm playing one champion versus one, and sometimes I should say with my Godtear group, we're here in New York, sometimes we just play one champion to one champion. We want to just play like a quick 15-minute battle. Maybe we want to throw some champions against each other, try them out, see what's going on, look and isolate those abilities. Really, I think we want to play with 3 or 2 champions. Playing with 2 champions gives you some synergy with both warbands and champions working together, allows you to mix and match some of the different faction colors and experience that. 3 champions gives you a great amount. Now, I will say the dynamics of the game and the flexibility and just really the power of the rule set on how great it is, we have played 4 versus 4 champions. We've played where we have 4 players on each side. Godtear scales up fantastic. Each player playing one champion, going head-to-head. It's absolute chaos. It's absolute carnage. Champions and followers are everywhere. It looks like a massive, massive battle, but this allows 8 players to enjoy Godtear. If I'm playing the base game 3 champions and I can pop that off and plant, that's big because now the champions on the other side, yes, they'll trample the banners. Yes, they might move my banner. Yes, they might remove and destroy my banner, all that. But you're going to have to burn turns. You're going to have to burn resources to do that. That's interesting. And I say that if you're playing a custom Godtear mission, a custom Godtear battle, that's just wow. Okay. And then the once daily power, I get to move banners. I get to move the banner on their effect. That's interesting because the big thing with the daily power or the once, I call it daily power, but the once battle power is when do you pop that off? And there's some interesting synergy because you're trying to remember and look at your opponent's dailies and figure out, okay, when are they going to do it? And you're trying to remember and think when you're going to do it. The biggest thing is, and this has happened once or twice, I've been so into Godtear, so in there checking out the miniatures and the battle and everything, and I'm like, yo, we're at the end of the game, and I didn't pop off my daily. So we want to remember this, especially with the synergy of planting it. If I see this as 2 possibilities. Early game planting just to get the points flowing, build up a little point bank, right? Again, with Godtear, it's a sliding scale. You don't just win or lose immediately. Every turn, we've got a scale of points, and then at the end of the round, end of the turn, we figure out who won that, and you get assigned a number of points. And these change over the course of the game. You need to score X number of points, depending on the game and the mission. So I need to make that decision looking at my opponent's warbands and their player personality and say, do I want to pop this off in the beginning? Okay, if I do that, then my opponent does not have to keep in mind that framework of when it's going to be utilized. It's like Fritz used this, good, okay, he got it, he got those points, but it's done for the game. Now I get to dictate, this is my opponent, I get to dictate when I'm going to utilize my dailies. So do I pop this off in the beginning and bank those points, or do I save it to the end where if I need to swing things a little bit and pick up some extra points, I can do that? That's really interesting. Okay, we're going to jump to part 2 in a moment because now we want to look at the followers, the treekin. What do they bring to the table? But to recap that framework, as we're looking at this miniature here and I'm flipping through the cards, my first impression is crazy health, area control, planting banners, denying banners, and I mean this in a good way, being just a rock solid, I should say tree solid champion and just being as annoying as possible to dislodge, to uproot, to deal with, working as a really, really amazing support champion.